The cops corner a lone biker on the roadside, smirking as they call him worthless and demand he bow to their authority. They shove his bike, spit insults, and laugh while strangers watch in silence. The biker does not react, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. They see only an old man, easy to crush. But in their arrogance, they miss the truth burning behind his calm. He is not just a biker. He is Chuck Norris. What happens when men drunk on power push the wrong man too far? Chuck Norris rode his motorcycle down a quiet suburban road, the late afternoon sun glinting off his helmet. His leather jacket was worn, his boots covered in dust, giving him the look of an ordinary traveler. He had just left a small diner in town, where he enjoyed a simple meal and a brief moment of peace. For him, the open road was freedom, a place where the noise of the world could not touch him. The houses along the road were modest, with a few neighbors out on their porches. They looked up when a patrol car rolled by slowly, its windows down. Inside were two young cops, arrogant in their posture, eager to show power. Their eyes locked on the lone biker as if he did not belong. They exchanged smirks, already planning trouble. Chuck slowed at the intersection, his body steady, movements precise. A faint scar traced his jawline, another on his hand gripping the throttle. To most, he looked like any older man riding through town. But those scars, his calm breathing, and the quiet discipline in his posture hinted at something more. Neighbors noticed too, whispering quietly, sensing tension in the air. The freedom of his ride was about to be broken, and the officers were ready to make him their target. The patrol car swerved sharply, blocking the narrow road just as Chuck Norris's motorcycle approached. He slowed, steady hands gripping the handlebars, but his calm was met with hostility. The two cops stepped out, their boots hitting the pavement with exaggerated force. One pointed at Chuck with a smirk. "You look suspicious," the officer said, circling the bike as if inspecting a criminal. "What are you doing here?" Chuck kept his tone even. "Riding through." The other officer stepped closer, his voice sharp. "Show us your ID." Now, the demand was not a request but a challenge. Chuck reached slowly toward his jacket pocket, but his calm demeanor irritated them further. "Move faster, old man," one officer snapped, shoving him hard against the bike. The motorcycle rocked, but Chuck's stance did not falter. His silence seemed to mock their arrogance. The younger one laughed, looking at his partner. "What is this, Grandpa's last ride?" Maybe he forgot what respect means. From porches and windows, neighbors watched, their faces tight with unease. A few held up phones discreetly recording. Yet no one spoke, afraid of becoming the next target. Chuck stood straight, his eyes sharp but quiet. His silence pressed heavier than their insults, like a storm gathering strength. What happens when silence hides a storm? The officer's laughter carried through the street, sharp and mocking, breaking the quiet of the neighborhood. One leaned casually against Chuck's motorcycle, tapping the chrome with his baton as if it already belonged to him. "Look at this old drifter," he said with a smirk. "Probably bouncing from town to town, living off scraps. Men like him are easy to handle." His partner joined in with a laugh that was meant to sting. "Yeah, he's no threat. Just another washed-up old man pretending to matter." Their words dripped with arrogance, their tone designed to humiliate. Chuck stood in the same spot, unmoving. His posture was straight, his eyes steady, his silence unbroken. Not a single muscle in his face revealed irritation or anger. To an outsider, he looked indifferent. But his stillness was deliberate, each breath measured, each glance sharp, calculating. He was studying them, every movement, every word, and every weakness. The taller officer stepped closer, his chest puffed out with authority. He pointed directly at Chuck, his voice louder now, meant for the audience that was beginning to form. "You are resisting. Don't think we can't see it. Standing there like that, refusing to answer, refusing to react, that's resisting. We could take you in right now if we wanted." The younger one chuckled, adding fuel. He wouldn't last a night in a cell. Men like him always fold. Chuck didn't move. He didn't argue. He didn't explain himself. His breathing remained steady. His hands relaxed at his sides. His lack of response only irritated them further. They mistook it for fear, for weakness, for the quiet surrender of a man who had nothing left. The officers grew bolder. One gave him a shove, light at first, almost playful, like a predator testing prey before the strike. "See," he laughed to his partner. "Nothing, just dead weight standing in front of us. He won't even look angry. But Chuck's eyes told a different story. He wasn't broken. He wasn't scared. He was waiting, watching. Calculating. Across the street, the curtain shifted. Doors cracked open. Neighbors leaned forward, whispering in hushed tones. Some held up their phones, the red record light blinking as they captured every insult, every push, every abuse of power. They felt the tension, but couldn't quite name it yet. Something about this moment felt like a fuse burning low. The cops laughed louder, confident in their performance, believing silence meant defeat. They couldn't see the truth standing before them, that Chuck's calm wasn't weakness at all. It was restraint. It was discipline. It was the kind of control they had never known. But who really holds control, the loud or the silent? One officer leaned harder against Chuck's motorcycle, his grin widening as if daring him to react. Then, with a sharp push of his boot, he sent the heavy bike crashing to the pavement. The sound of metal scraping against concrete rang out like a gunshot through the street. The chrome bent, the paint chipped, and the machine that had clearly been cared for with discipline and pride now lay on its side, damaged. Chuck didn't move. His eyes followed the fall of the bike, calm and steady, as if he were memorizing every detail. Not a flicker of rage crossed his face. The second officer stepped forward, his voice dripping with false authority. "Say something now, old man." His hand rose into the air, fingers curling into a fist, the threat of violence clear. The gesture was meant to break him, to force a reaction. The crowd sucked in their breath, waiting for the strike. But Chuck didn't flinch. Instead, he drew in a quiet breath and let out a single word, spoken low but heavy enough to cut through the air. Enough. The word was so calm, so precise, that for a brief second the officers hesitated. Then they burst out laughing. "Enough?" The one with the raised hand mocked. "That's all you've got?" His partner added with a sneer. "He talks like he's in some old war movie." Pathetic. The laughter echoed across the street, but not everyone found it amusing. From the group of neighbors now gathered, a woman leaned closer to the man beside her and whispered, "Something about this man feels dangerous." Her tone wasn't fearful. It was certain, like an instinct warning her that the balance in front of them was shifting. Chuck remained motionless, his silence thicker now, heavier. It wasn't weakness, it wasn't surrender. It was a waiting storm, quiet but certain. Every second of his stillness wound the tension tighter, and the crowd could feel it pressing against their chest. The officers, blind in their arrogance, thought they had control. They thought the laughter meant victory, that the broken bike and raised fist made them powerful. But power was about to arrive in a way they never expected. Chuck finally lifted his eyes, meeting theirs with a calm so sharp it cut deeper than anger. His voice carried no shout, no strain, just a measured certainty that silenced the street. "You are threatening the wrong man." The words landed heavier than fists, and for the first time the officers felt a crack in their confidence. The taller cop's smirk faltered. His hand twitched toward the holster at his side, fingers curling around the grip of his weapon. The movement was slow, hesitant, not the confident draw he had practiced countless times. His partner barked a laugh to cover the tension, but the sound was hollow. Chuck took a single step forward. It wasn't much, but the shift in his posture transformed everything. The slouched frame of an old biker straightened into something disciplined, deliberate, shoulders squared, stance grounded, eyes steady. He no longer looked like a man simply passing through. He looked like a soldier who had walked battlefields and survived them. The younger officer's laugh caught in his throat. Recognition flickered across his face, uncertain at first, then growing sharper as the pieces clicked together. His voice dropped to a whisper meant only for his partner. "Wait, is that?" The question hung unfinished, swallowed by the sudden vibration underfoot. Engines. Low at first, then rising into a thunder that shook windows and rattled the street sign. Every head turned as the sound grew closer, rolling over the neighborhood like a storm. From the bend in the road, headlights cut through the dusk. One Humvee appeared, then another, then a line of them stretching further than the eye could see. 10, 20, 30. By the time the count reached 50, the entire street was surrounded. Neighbors gasped, hands flying to mouths, children pressed against fences, eyes wide in disbelief. This was no accident. This was precision. This was power arriving on command. Chuck stood silent at the center of it all, his calm presence suddenly magnified by the force encircling the street. The officers, once so bold, now looked very small against the wall of armored steel. What happens when arrogance is surrounded by unstoppable force? Doors to the Humvees opened in unison, the metallic clank echoing like a warning bell. One by one, soldiers stepped out, boots striking the pavement in perfect rhythm. Their uniforms were crisp, their weapons gleaming under the fading light. Each man and woman moved with precision, forming a solid line behind Chuck. Then, as if choreographed, they raised their hands in a sharp salute. The message was undeniable. This man was not just respected, he was their leader. The officers who had been so smug a moment ago froze where they stood, their faces drained of color, lips parting but no words escaping. They stumbled back, tripping over their own arrogance, the weight of fear heavy in their chests. The crowd saw it instantly. The predators of the afternoon had suddenly become prey in the presence of true power. Chuck did not raise a fist. He didn't need to. His voice, calm and steady, carried louder than any weapon. Power is meant to protect, not to humiliate. The words struck harder than any blow could, stripping away the last shred of false dominance the officers clung to. Behind him, the soldiers stood tall, silent guardians radiating discipline and strength. Their very presence was enough to crush whatever defiance lingered in the cop's eyes. No weapon needed to be drawn. No order needed to be given. The sight of respect and loyalty directed toward Chuck was a verdict in itself. The neighbors, who had watched in tense silence, erupted into cheers. Phones lifted high, voices carried across the street. What had begun as whispered disbelief turned into roaring support. The people who once feared speaking up now found courage in the moment, their voices louder than the sirens that had once silenced them. The officers stood small, humiliated, their arrogance shattered and their cruelty exposed before the very community they had tried to intimidate. There was no excuse left for them to hide behind, no badge strong enough to mask their shame. The street grew quiet again, the roar of engines fading as order replaced chaos. Chuck calmly walked to his bike, lifted it upright with steady hands, and brushed the dust from its frame. He turned to the soldiers who stood ready, and with a firm nod, he said, "Let us go." Without hesitation, they saluted once more, then dispersed, their vehicles pulling away until the street was clear. The two officers were left trembling, their faces red with shame, stripped of the arrogance they once wore so proudly. Neighbors stepped forward, no longer afraid, approaching Chuck with quiet respect. They did not see him as a legend or a celebrity. They saw him as a man who held back, who showed that true strength lies not in violence but in restraint. The lesson was clear. Authority is not meant to crush. It is meant to protect. Power is not for humiliation. It is for dignity. Justice was served. But if you were in Chuck's place, would you have shown mercy or punishment?